she's born Agatha Cardiff. She's Agatha Cross when we meet her at the end. So it's a political thriller, which I'm not from Washington, D.C., but I've lived here most of my life. And I've always had the thought of writing a political thriller. And I kind of been avoiding it because politics has been a little tense for the last 10 years or so. And so I've always sort of found one reason or another to avoid the subject. And I just decided that it was time. I really wanted, like, I hadn't seen a political thriller that I really liked in a while. And what I realized was is that, I was a little bit nervous of writing a political thriller because, everyone has such strong feelings about politics. And I realized that, like, the trick was, is that, party politics don't really matter. It's really about the system. It's really about how DC works. And DC works the same whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Like the machine is bigger than the players. It's bigger than the parties. And once you're here, you really start to understand, what it takes to survive here. And it's complex. It's not as simple as it appears on the news or from a distance, but like having grown up here, it's really an interesting environment. And so Agatha was, the Slate is a story of a political fixer who definitely crossed some lines when she was young and quit. It's a very much a class, character brought out of retirement, and she's basically quit. She's living a quiet life on Capitol Hill in a neighborhood sort of to the east of the Supreme Court and the Hill, and her downstairs tenant disappears. And so she is sort of folded back into, basically she has to dust off her old skill set and go hunting. And so I hope that I've captured DC honestly. I think it's fun. Like there's no, she's very much in that role of fixer and maneuverer and negotiator. She was really fun to write. It was all right, I want to write a thriller with a 50-year-old woman as the lead character who never fires a gun and has to do everything with her, like, the best fixer characters, they're never the ones, getting into fights. They're the ones maneuvering in the shadows. And I love those characters. I've always loved that archetype. It was one that I needed to build something that didn't resemble any real world politics. Like I knew that as soon as you got into that, for a lot of people, it would just become sort of a non-starter. So it needed to be an entirely fictional world with a fictional, there's no analog for the story I didn't rip from the headlines at all, because to me, the central character, again, it is DC itself. And, you're saying like, we haven't seen politics like this before, but like, to some extent, I think we have. I saw something that said like, well, we're at a more contentious time than we've ever been in our history. And I went, really? Are we leaving the Civil War out? They are. So the Civil War, taking the Civil War out of the picture, and the fist fights that broke out in Congress during Reconstruction, you're saying this is this isn't remotely the most contentious time. We're a whole Civil War short of the most contentious time. Watergate. I mean, you can go back to Roosevelt in the 30s, who during the Great Depression used the Great Depression as an excuse to run for president a third and fourth time, which had never been done. And then he tried to pack the Supreme Court. And he used, no one. George Washington served 2 terms, and then he stepped down, and that's what everyone did until Roosevelt. And then Roosevelt's, no, I'm too important. and we have this Great Depression on, so I'm going to run for a third term because it doesn't actually say anywhere that I can't do it. And then he did it and he got elected. He's like, you know what? That was fun. I'm going to go for 4. And I don't like how the Supreme Court is ruling, so I'm just going to add justices. They stopped him from doing it, but like he had a whole plan to add a whole bunch of justices so that he could do whatever he wanted. I'm like, that doesn't seem all that different from anything we're seeing. We've just had such a long period of sort of comfort that I think we're all sort of surprised at how fragile the whole thing is. But it's all, I mean, I was a tiny baby when Watergate happened, but it happens. So I don't know that DC has changed. I think once again we're in a period where people are willing to push push against the systems and push against but that's happened before and it'll happen again. Like it's sort of up, it's a test of the robustness of the system, whether or not it can absorb, what's being done to it. Will it survive? Again, I don't know. But so writing about it was really fun, like writing about the White House and writing about the Supreme Court, like those bodies, I don't think they are different. Like that was sort of that was my fundamental assumption. Like they're not different. We're just seeing behaviors that we're not comfortable with or haven't seen in our lifetime. But the mechanisms that are grind the machine underneath, it's just like that is perpetual. Like it's mostly just like it's like saying like the Serengeti is the Serengeti. And if you're an antelope in the Serengeti is not your enemy. The Serengeti is just the Serengeti, and you got to survive. You got to navigate through it. You got to keep your head on a swivel for the lions and the cheetahs and the hyenas. But at the end of the day, if you're a deer, like whatever a Serengeti version of a deer is, you got to, it doesn't really, the Serengeti doesn't care about you. Like it's just doing its thing. It's an ecosystem. In DC, it's not that it's an enemy. It's an ecosystem. Like New York City or Hollywood. If you go to Hollywood, people always talk about Hollywood, like, oh, Hollywood did a thing. I'm like, there is no Hollywood. There are about 300 production companies and studios and entities just trying to make a living. Hollywood doesn't get together and be like, well, this is what we're going to do. There is like Hollywood's an address. And like they are not a mind. Hollywood's a system and everyone's in it just trying to get along. And it's not the enemy, it's not good or it's pretty much amoral. And New York City, kind of the Wall Street, it's kind of the same, like once you get into a human ecosystem, you are, what are the rules? What are the drivers and how do you survive? DC is kind of the same thing. You get there, it's like Mr. Smith Comes to Washington. Like that's an old movie, but it's the same idea of someone coming to DC thinking they're going to change it. But DC is bigger. The engine of it, the engine of human, motivations, like, you don't beat it. It be like you become part of it, or you get shown the door.